Hello everyone, I'm Samyukta. So today we look at the concept of feminism. So feminism is a happening thing even today, and it basically means a fight towards the equality of men and women on all things, whether it be uh, financial equality, political equality, and economical equality. So equality between men and women on all fronts was what feminism was about. Feminism is mainly a Western concept. In human history, women's existence is observed through male point of view, as a result of which women are always considered as secondary. So the primary position is given to men. So feminism comes into existence through the struggle for women's rights against the injustice carried out in the society by the patriarchal society specifically. So we have the definition of feminism. So the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary defines feminism as the belief and aim that women should have the same rights and opportunities as men, the struggle to achieve this aim. Feminism involves different aspects related to women's rights in the society, such as political, social, and economical. The allotment of these rights provides women a means of participation in politics, business, and legal matters, and also helps them to get recognition and build up power in the society. And feminism specifically covers two major concepts, that of gender and patriarchy. Gender is identified through the difference of male and female. It is also regarded as a sex role in sociology. In the society of the past, all the decisions in the family were dependent on the men, and therefore women were given secondary status. So, this position in the family came to be known as patriarchy, and that is how patriarchal society also arose. So, this system had a lot of influence on the society. Hence, male members of the society enjoyed all the privileges allotted to them by the society, whereas women were always given secondary status. So from these general observations, feminist theory came into existence that raised the concept of inequality between male and female. It becomes essential to understand the origin of feminism before we go into the feminist theory. Back in the 19th century, women from England and America started a movement for their voting right. Till 1960, the movement was not up to the mark, but later it started taking its speed. Various movements took place, after which the writings of some of the famous feminists like Betty Friedan, Germaine Greer, and Kate Millett became popular. So it all started with women fighting for their votes. And then it went on to the campaigns also developed where women started to fight for their property rights and then women's reproductive rights. And it also went on to fighting for rights at workplace. So all these various phases of feminism is recorded through the three waves of feminism. And we will look at that in the upcoming slides. So post 1960s, feminism began to peak with the writings of these feminists, as I already said. So now let us look at the waves of feminism. From the 19th century, feminism is studied in the context of three waves, especially in the United States and United Kingdom. So they are the first wave feminism, second wave feminism, and third wave feminism, and the time periods are also given. So why waves? Why are all these phases of feminism called as waves? So that is significant for us to understand, because the time period of all these various phases of feminism was not very clear. The time period was very abstract because none of the critics had a clear idea of when this feminist movement began or when one particular phase of feminism ended. So that's why they called it as a wave, because it gradually began, it went to a peak, and then it gradually came down without any clear-cut time frame. So that's why these were all called as waves. And this term wave, it only came into existence during the second wave of feminism, when this term was introduced in one of the editorial works in a newspaper column. So that's how this term called wave came into existence. So now let's look at the first wave of feminism, and it is between 1848 and 1915. So, feminism itself is an older concept and it began in the 19th and 20th century in America and in Britain. The first wave feminism was mainly concerned with women's suffrage, that is, voting rights for women. So, the first wave feminists include Elizabeth Robbins, Dorothy Richardson, Catherine Mansfield, and Virginia Woolf, who are the founders of this contemporary feminism. So, Simone de Beauvoir is the last critic of the first wave feminism, and she is the founder of the newspaper called Novelist Feminists, and she is the feminist critic who raised the general question related to women. She also wrote the very famous book, The Second Sex, 1945, that differentiated biological, psychological, and economical discrimination between male and female in the society. She further goes on commenting on the social aspects related to women and her very famous quote, "One is not born but rather becomes woman. He is one, she is other." So, this is a very important quote where she says that a man is always considered to be the one and the woman is only the other. So, it clearly signifies the role that women and men have in the society. And Simone de Beauvoir also makes a distinction between female and being constructed as a woman. And she explores various stages relating to the life of women, such as childhood, adolescence, sexual initiation, lesbianism, marriage, motherhood, and old age. So, all these various phases of a woman's life is also explored by Simone de Beauvoir. Further, the first wave feminism provided the platform to women to question the institution of marriage, where women and children were considered as the property of men. So, at the end of the first wave feminism, most of the women were granted rights to vote in the early 20th century. So, after the 1960s, the struggle continued as the second wave feminism. Second wave feminism of women's liberation began in the 1960s. It emphasized cultural, social, and political discrimination related to women in the society. So, Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique and Beauvoir's The Second Sex are the substantial works produced during the second wave feminism. And second wave feminists, they followed in the footsteps of the first wave feminists, asking for equality in workplace. So it was the period when girls started receiving university education, and they also actively participated in the civil rights struggle as well as radical issues related to youth culture movements. During that period, many women were driven back to their traditional roles, that is, of the roles of wives and of mothers. So even these women were not having lots of opportunities, and if they do get an opportunity, they had to work with low wages. So their wages at workplace was far less than men. So this situation caused dissatisfaction in the lives of women, and this related to social and economic injustice in the society. Further, dissatisfaction that women began to face within their households also triggered the women's liberation movement. So there is a very rich background to this women's liberation movement. That is, during World War II, over 6 million women took an active part in the workforce. They filled positions in factories or working on farms. Over 3 million women worked for the Red Cross, and over 200,000 women served in the military. So at the end of the war, women were laid off from the positions they had during the war, because during war there was no male workers, so women were recruited. But after war, the men began to return from war, and so women were again laid off from their work. So women again were thrown into the life of being a housewife. In 1949, Beauvoir's The Second Sex depicts women as just another body, not an equal to men. So her explanation of how a woman is being stereotyped inspired women to rise against the male power in the society. So the 1960s became a year of change. People became more vocal and strived for equality among all. The Food and Drug Administration approved the first oral contraceptive for women in the United States. So they were available to women for the following year. So this became the first step in the liberation movement. So this now allowed women to stand to take a stand on their reproductive rights. So, this is how slowly women began to expand their rights on all fields. So, the second wave feminism can be considered as the product of the liberationist movement of the 1960s. At this backdrop, Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique sparked women to rise against the stereotyped roles put down by the patriarchal society. While the traditional American society during the 1960s demanded to women to confine to their homes and take care of the children, Friedan explained how such confinement was affecting women both physically and psychologically. Women needed to feel alive and they wanted to get education and employment and build a career for themselves just like men do. So, this aspect of a woman was first put forth by Betty Friedan in her The Feminine Mystique. Further, prior to the second wave of feminism, many feminists have not concentrated on women as readers, but here, after the second wave feminism, these feminists tried to develop a female framework for dealing with women's writing related to the aspects of analysis and interpretations. So, this includes the writings of Patricia Mayer Sparks, Elaine Showalter, and Susan Gubar. So, all these women they began to concentrate on a female framework in order to analyze the female critics came into existence after the writings of these women. Kate Millett's Sexual Politics becomes an important text during the second wave feminism. So, in her book, Millett reveals certain topics concerning women, such as patriarchy and the exploitation of women, criticizing the writers such as D.H. Lawrence, Henry Miller, and Norman Mailer, who portray women as just an object. They had objectified women in their writings, and that was criticized by Millett in her book. She further criticizes the stereotyped cultural expectations and norms that are forced on women, such as, girls must be passive and weak, whereas boys must be aggressive and domineering. So, all these stereotypical cultural norms were criticized by Kate Millett in her Sexual Politics. And this quote, "Patriarchy has God on its side," is a very famous quote by Kate Millett in her Sexual Politics. So, the second wave feminism concentrates on one important concept, that is, the personal is political. It reveals patriarchal oppression. Finally, it also gave rise to the third wave of feminism. So, the third wave feminism roughly began in the 1990s and it is considered to be still happening in the present. So, the third wave feminism is also called as post-feminism or revisionary feminism, which began in the late 1960s and flourished in the 21st century. It explores the relationship between gender and language and covered issues related to discrimination against women in the publishing sectors. That is, the focus had changed into the literary scenario. The third wave feminism covers the aspects of race and multiculturalism. It challenged the dominant form of white feminism through powerful narration. So, this is the time when black feminism and intersectional feminism began to find their roots and origins. So, this phase of feminism concentrated on the concept of new hybridity, that is, multiple identities of girls and women. They all have a place, all have a say in this kind of feminism. That was the motto of the third wave of feminism, that is, inclusion of all race and class. So that's how intersectional feminism was also gave way. That is, intersectional feminism was inclusive of everything, that is ethnicity, culture, language, class, race, education, sexuality, age, and everything. So the third wave of feminism gave rise to various other forms of feminism like intersectional feminism and black feminism that concentrated on the rights that are denied to marginal women. That is, women of minority groups, colored women are oppressed on a double level. So, in the third wave of feminism, something called Thirdworld feminism or black feminism also found its way, and that is clearly depicted in this graph. That is, the center, the circle at the center, it represents the patriarchal center, that is, the world that is occupied and dominated by men. So, at the outer range of this circle, at the circumference of this circle, are the white feminists fighting for their so-called sophisticated rights, such as right to vote, right to education, and right to property and reproductive rights. So these rights were all considered to be sophisticated rights by the black feminists. That is, they are in a position where they are denied even the basic position in the society. They are not even considered as human beings. So even that level of recognition is denied to them. Whereas the white feminists are fighting for rights that can never be a reality for the black woman. And this black woman is oppressed not only the men within her community, but she is also oppressed by the females of the community higher than her. That is, the female of the community that is high above her community, who are in the higher strata of the society. And she is also oppressed by the men of the higher strata of the society. So the black woman is doubly and triply oppressed, and that's how third world feminism came into existence. And next, we have a small pictorial representation of the three waves of feminism. So, the first wave, it was completely dedicated to the women's suffrage, that is, right to vote. And the second wave feminism was concentrated on equal pay and reproductive rights for women. And third wave feminism, it covers every other thing, that is, gender roles, media portrayal, women's rights and women's choice, and all the other things that are talked about now. It is all covered in the third wave of feminism. And there are also some critics who say that now there is another feminism called the fourth wave of feminism that is in existence, but that is not officially recorded, so we are not sure about that. Finally, feminist literary criticism. So feminist literary analysis, it actually examines all the following aspects. The feminist school can be divided into two different aspects of women, that is, woman as a reader and woman as a writer. So in one aspect, the woman is considered as the consumer of literature produced by the male, and in the second aspect, she is considered as providing the textual meaning, and she is also considered as a producer of structures in literature, that is, a literary critic, a female literary critic. So the first serious feminist criticism forms its constitution by the major critical studies of women's writers from the viewpoint of the female tradition. So this is how Elaine's Showalter literature of their own came into existence, and in this text, Showalter discusses three important stages of women's writing, and she identifies these stages as feminine, feminist, and female. So the first period, that is the feminine period, it covers the time between 1840 to 1889, and it deals with the imitation of mainstream literary tradition. And the second stage, that is between 1890 to 1920, the feminist period, it protests against this dominant tradition in the society, that is the dominant male tradition of writing in the society. And the third period, that is the female period between 1920 and 1960s, is where women began to stage search for their identity. They began to create their own identity as far as literature is concerned. This is just a small introduction to female literary criticism. And so we have come to the conclusion. So in this video, we saw what is meant by feminism and a brief origin of feminism, and then we saw the various waves of feminism and also women's liberation movement, and finally a short introduction about feminist literary criticism, and then the important point, that is Showalter's three stages of women's writing: feminine, feminist, and female. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any doubts or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you.